How are you feeling today, Alex?
I actually feel good because I get a chance to, for the first time, say what's really going on instead of the corporate media and high-powered law firms manipulating what I actually did.
Today on Future Forward, since the horrific murders in Sandy Hook more than 10 years ago, Alex Jones has been trading in misinformation and fictionalized hateful rhetoric. He's profited mightily selling snake oil. But now it seems the slow wheels of justice have come to a conclusion that's hard to ignore. What does this mean to the January 6th investigation now that his text messages have been revealed? Media critic and author Bob Garfield has been following the case and joins us to talk about the case and its outcomes. I'm Steven Rosenbaum. Welcome, Bob, to the pod.
So we're here with Bob Garfield, who is our favorite Alex Jones expert. So you've been a longtime fan of his, haven't you? You have
oh gosh, yeah,
everything.
yeah. I mean, he's a visionary. Let's start with that. He's got a lot of charisma. I mean, he's just got such a winning personality, and he immediately captured my attention years ago when he revealed, in some detail exactly why Barack Obama could not possibly have been born in the United States. So I guess on just about every level, he just kind of sends me, and always has. He's fantastic. I wish he had married one of my daughters.
That's lovely. So the court case and the original damages, on one hand, the compensatory damages, on one hand, seemed like a news story of the moment. And then it was like, wait, this has been going on for a really long time. I mean, he's been viciously and heartlessly torturing these people since they lost their child, which, I am not by my nature a murderous person. I don't go to murder as kind of the first checkbox on but I just think if I were already suffering the loss of my child and then this man sicked his rabid, angry crowd on me, I might not wait for the slow wheels of justice to grind along.
Yeah, I understand that sentiment. I mean, certainly if you were to read a newspaper story that said somebody had turned him upside down while alive and fed him into a wood chipper, Fargo style, you probably would go, that's the way it goes. I mean, he's just an especially vile human being, and not just vile, incorrigibly vile. And he kept at it straight through this. Yeah, well,
yeah, and I guess part of what worries. So the optimist in me says, let's do a podcast about how the message will be sent at the result of all of these trials, and we'll talk about, there's a number of them, and then all of these verdicts, of which there's a number of them, that the message will go out that being a vile hate monger doesn't pay any longer. But I fear that's not the case. So I guess let me start with we'll kind of unpeel the onion here a little bit. When you heard the number yesterday, or now a couple of days ago, did you immediately go, yay, or was your reaction like, whoa, that seems low to me?
Yes, and yes. I mean, $4 million is not a trivial sum of money. I was expecting a larger compensatory damages award, although there's kind of a formula that you have to fill out this spreadsheet with all of the factors about it that attempt to put a price on your pain and suffering and the economic harm and so on. It's a kind of weird bit of cost accounting. But in the punitive damage stages, which is going on right now, the jury is at this very moment, as we speak on Friday afternoon, deliberating the punitive damages. I expect that we're going to see a much larger number. I still believe it will be north of $100 million, but based on nothing except, my vague understanding of jury aggression against pieces of shit.
So so how many cases? So, and I haven't done the proper research, but there's a whole series of court cases with different ones that are tied up in different bankruptcy issues. Like, is there, I mean, he still has to get out of bed in the morning and go to the next trial and sit through the next verdict and get the next. I mean, at some point, does this not add up to being, bad enough that he ends up living in a cardboard box down by the river, or is the answer never?
Well, first of all, from your lips to God's ears, I don't know what protection will be afforded to him by bankruptcy. I don't know how much money he has squirreled away in offshore accounts. I'm going to assume it's a lot, but I don't know. And I don't know how aggressive the courts will be in making sure he pays whatever judgment comes out in the Texas trial and in the Connecticut one. So he's gonna have a bad weekend. Anyway, look at it. He's gonna have a bad weekend, and I hope he's a tortured human being and penniless for the rest of his life. But who knows? He's a squirrel, and there's squirrels run through the streets willy-nilly, but you seldom see a dead one in the middle.
No, that's not true. I've seen dead squirrels, usually anyway. All right, so we're not going to project anything other than we think that there will continue to be jury verdicts. And by the way, I believe that his bankruptcy will not be upheld, because I don't think you can file bankruptcy based on the fact that after the trials that have not yet been completed and the verdicts that have not, I don't think you can project out that there will be a jury verdict that will mean you will be bankrupt in the future, so therefore make me bankrupt now.
I've often over the last few days wondered about that. You're asking the bankruptcy court to look prospectively at your financial circumstances to protect you in advance from the doom that is awaiting you, but I just don't think it works that way. And we'll just see what portion of his assets that they can locate gets attached as a basis of the outcome of the Texas trial.
So let's go to the delightful part, with the caveat being that even if there had been that fabulous moment, which I'll show as we speak.
Did you know that 12 days ago, your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message you've sent for the past 2 years, and when informed, did not take any steps to identify it as privileged or protect it in any way. And as of 2 days ago, it fell free and clear into my possession. And that is how I know you lied to me when you said you didn't have text messages about Sandy Hook. Did you know that?
I told you the truth. This is your Perry Mason moment. I gave them my phone, and then
Mr. Jones, you need to answer the question.
No,
Did you know this happened?
No, I didn't know this happened.
Yeah. So what you're showing me is the tape of of the plaintiff's lawyer informing Alex Jones that his own lawyer, this guy, I think his name's Renal, had inadvertently sent him a text message containing 2 years of his own emails and texts about not just this case, but January 6th and a whole lot of other things. And what made that interesting was that Jones had sworn under oath that he had searched to find those texts and emails and could not locate them. So he was in real time. We got to see him being caught for perjury, not to mention whatever this trove of texts and emails will reveal about his activities.
So perjury is criminal.
Mm-hmm.
So all of a sudden, it's not just how much money are you going to be able to squirrel away and hide. It's no, actually, you might have broken the law. Like,
Yeah, baby.
Which, and then there is this unspooling where it's like, wait, the best way I can describe it is it's like the high class madam who gives her black book to the police, and in it is the name of every famous person in town, all of whom have dates and times and the names of their servicer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the text messages, it would seem likely, will drag in, the Oath Keepers and a whole bunch of Trumpian people and maybe some federal officials, and the fact that very quickly it became, well, the January 6th committee would like to see those text messages. You think?
Yeah, especially the ones from January 5th.
Yeah.
When he was in Washington and apparently in contact with the people in the war room at the Willard Hotel, Giuliani and Roger Stone, and whoever was coordinating the mischief. Yeah, I mean, there's the opportunities for Schadenfreude are so great. And by the way, on the criminal side, it is entirely possible that the judge is, the moment the penalty phase is complete, will rule on contempt of court and also forward charges for perjury on God knows what number of counts to I guess it would be the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, who is a creep on his own right and a crook and a reactionary. So who knows what will happen? So that's a possibility. But the idea of jail time for this monster is just too delicious to contemplate.
I think it's important for our listeners to understand that these words like monster are not words we're using lightly. I mean, we don't call the guy behind the counter at the deli who mismakes your sandwich a monster, or the traffic.
Well, that depends on what happens with the mayonnaise, but you're right. Generally speaking, monstrosity it's a high bar, which he has. I mean, he has soared over. Because, again, he intentionally and repeatedly over more than a decade not only taunted and defamed the poor parents of these poor children, but caused his whole network of conspiracy cultists to do the same. And they were harassed and haunted and accused and tortured on a grand scale, and he's right at the heart of it. There is some inner circle of hell for people so cynical and opportunistic and fucking evil. But I will say this. When we start talking about Alex Jones, he's the personification of the meanness and the cruelty and the stupidity and the almost unfathomable malice. But that's what he is. He's the personification. The evil is spread pretty far and wide. I don't consider the other members of the cult to be the victims of his lies and misinformation. I consider them to be co-conspirators. You cannot believe this stuff and spread it and act against these parents unless you were predisposed yourself for whatever reason to buy in. I like to say that the cops on the old bunco squads never felt particularly sympathetic for the victims of a grift or a con, because the people wanted something for nothing and had larceny in the hearts themselves. And that's the way I feel about MAGA. That's the way I feel about the red state, the Arizona Republicans who voted for an election denier for the governor's nomination and for the Arizona Secretary of State nomination. These people are not dupes. They are participants. So he is the personification representing all of my anger and resentment and disgust and fear about forces far larger than his own shitty conduct.
I want to ask a kind of a complicated question, though. So when you listen to what he said about the judge or the jury, for example, and how, he called them name, this was a week before the trial, you find yourself wondering, so is he brilliantly strategic, which is he knows he's gonna appeal, he knows he's gonna lose, or is he stupid? Like, why would you go and then to see him in the courtroom when he's asked if he believes that Sandy Hook happened, and he says, "Oh, absolutely, 100%, it's real. Now that I've met these parents, I like." So you're missing, like, for all these years you were saying terrible things about them. It was just because they hadn't stopped by and knocked on the door and shook your hand. Like how? I don't understand.
He will say whatever whatever he imagines at the moment will do him good. And if that is to offer some sort of, slight equivocation about his about how right he was, if it means to attack the judge or to call the jury working class, super working class, by which he means, naive, uneducated, and stupid. I mean, that I'm imputing those words to him. That's not my take on working class, but in any event, he will say in the moment what he thinks is going to serve him the best. But that is entirely based on his own ego and his own business, right? He's trying to keep the business model alive, which is to say ever more outrageous things, in order to appeal to his audience, but just equivocating enough to diminish the jury award, right? But I will say this, from the beginning, he has told the same lie over and over and over and over. And I'm not talking about that it was a hoax and it was a false flag operation and that there were crisis actors and that these kids never existed and all that poison. The underlying argument he makes is the free speech argument, that he is just a journalist whose audience had questions, and it was incumbent on him to try to find answers, which is what a journalist would say. And he continues to say, even as of 2 days ago in court, in this penalty phase of the case, he's still saying that all he was doing was trying to answer some questions about anomalies, still trying to justify his monstrosity. And, I don't know what that's all about. I don't know whether he's told himself that lie in order to live with himself, and whether otherwise he would be in a pool of his own blood with, a razor blade by his wrist. I don't know. But he, even though he said the other day that it was 100% a real mass murder, he still is representing himself as a journalist just looking into unanswered questions. And that is an even more dangerous lie.
So some of our listeners will not remember this name, because one of the weird things about the media world we live in is that once people are off the stage, their name is kind of strangely erased from consciousness. But you had a spectacularly famous interaction with the Alex Jones of his time, Glenn Beck. And so as I was watching Alex Jones try to walk back, I thought to myself, I remember that moment. I remember him essentially walking off your radio show. because you asked him something that I thought was relatively innocuous, right? You were basically like, justify your. I'm going to forget the actual quote that got him. I mean, he was kind of halfway out the door already. Wait. To be fair, he was repairing his image after years of hate speech, and had come on your show
Well,
essentially
first he'd gone on other shows and
Right.
done other print interviews with some, major news organizations who all bought this ridiculous notion that he had somehow been reformed and he was going to, start being more empathetic and stop telling crazy conspiratorial lies and, generally turn over a new leaf. And the New York Times, the New Yorker, people were buying this. They ate it up. And I'm like, oh, for fuck's sake. And so I brought him on and just confronted him with his history and asked him some questions about his business model and his motivation for, the great Glenn Beck apology tour. And he took offense that I was not as compliant an interviewer as his previous ones. And yeah, he walked off.
And then went from being anti-Trump to being a full-on MAGA, like within a year, right? He essentially
it was about a year and a half, before
So he tried the new Glenn Beck act and it didn't sell, and he's like, all right, fine, I'll just put on the red hat and go out and work that crowd.
Yeah, and sell being the key word, right? His business was getting squeezed by people, and this is hard to even get your head around this concept, but even more right-wing and despicable than him, he was losing to there's a million online provocateurs, and he was, sort of losing his mojo to them. So he decided to move left to see if there was some something in that market, and it was unavailing for him. But Glenn Beck, he just a 5-6 alarm asshole, a liar, a charlatan, he was sort of had the morals of a televangelist. And next to Alex Jones, he's the fucking Dalai Lama. Alex Jones is in his own category of evil because of the way he prayed and incited others to prey on these just wretched folks who had lost their children to a madman.
So this is the cynicism part that I started the pod out with, which is, so if Alex Jones is just one in a series of, presuming that all of these lawsuits bankrupt him and he lives in a cardboard box down by the river, someone else is going to come along. And I guess my question is, and maybe this is actually this trend toward families of victims suing, and I'm thinking about the gun manufacturers being sued by families of murderous gun rampages. Maybe there is starting to be case law that will kind of codify the fact that really bad purposeful actions have economic consequences that make Alex Jones 2.0 not a good business model.
Well, yeah. I mean, this is how Ralph Nader got started with public interest law. And, he changed the world, starting with the American automobile industry, by just suing corporations for negligence of various kinds. And it became a whole category of law. And it became such an important category of law that the political right started this whole notion of tort reform to protect corporations and individuals, but mainly corporations, from large jury verdicts that had the effect that government regulation is supposed to have, but our regulatory apparatus has been mostly asleep at the switch for the last 50 years. So the courts have picked up where government regulation has failed, and it's been very important. Now, it's very hard to sue the media the way you would sue General Motors. Very hard because of that annoying First Amendment, which we do not want to compromise. But maybe if Alex Jones goes the way of Philip Morris, and if the gun manufacturers go the way of Philip Morris, maybe that does offer some hope. I know Elizabeth Williamson thinks so. She's the New York Times reporter who has been covering these cases and wrote a fabulous book about the Sandy Hook parents and their litigation, and first their nightmare and then their litigation. And she believes that there is some hope to be had about a chilling effect on the next generation of Alex Joneses. I'm a little less sanguine. I just think there'll be another and another and another and another and another.
So,
by the way,
yeah,
I'm sorry, Steve, you don't have to go to the far reaches of the dark web to find them. Just turn on Fox News Channel and there's Tucker Carlson. I mean, he's Alex Jones with better lighting and sound.
Yeah, and that crazy Joker laugh that he seems to now be practiced at. By the way, sidebar, but worth it for a second. The Jon Stewart Tucker Carlson Twitter battle is on a slow news day. It doesn't get any better than that.
It's pretty great, but it's like I use Twitter a lot as a form of emotional masturbation. There's some catharsis to say what is making you very, very angry in the moment, and it has no effect on anything but my own psyche. It doesn't change the world. And it's fun to watch Jon Stewart go after Tucker Carlson, but it ain't having no effect on Tucker Carlson.
No, although it did seem to get the veterans burn pit legislation through.
That it did. I mean, that was really something, and it got the Republican Party to reverse its
absurd
objection to the legislation. But that's different from the name calling battles, which I engage in myself. So there, but for the grace of God.
So I had this funny experience yesterday. I was preparing to talk to you and I had my head thinking about Alex Jones and realized that I hadn't really listened or watched InfoWars in, ever. And so I thought, if I'm going to do this, I ought to be a student for 30 seconds. And so I went and tried to find the feed or the whatever it was and went through a bunch of podcasts and found a whole bunch of anti-Alex Jones podcasts, but was unable to find him certainly on iTunes, and then a bunch of other podcast apps that I use. Typing complicated searches like Alex Jones or InfoWars. So maybe he's been dialed out of those platforms. I don't even know how that would work.
Yeah, I don't know either, but I know he still has a gigantic audience because I know he's still selling a lot of the merch, the nutritional crap that he sells, and all sorts of other snake oil. I mean, in a recent month, in one day, he sold $800,000 worth of stuff.
Which made me immediately sad when I heard that, because I said, so that means that literally he can pay off this jury verdict in 4.5 days.
Well, he points out that was a really good day. Also, that's just the gross sales. That's not the margins.
Yeah, and, no. But if it's literally a bucket of water with some food coloring in it, presumably the markup is pretty good.
Yeah, probably it's pretty good. And I like the idea of it not being worthwhile for him even to bother anymore because it's all going to go into his legal liability.
So let's just take, we've got about a minute left. So going forward, we think that even without the text messages, he was still guilty as hell. It may have actually not moved the verdict but how many more cases are there? And do we know, How did the dominoes fall? Or we don't.
Well, there is a case or cases in Connecticut, and it's the same situation. He's already had the direct verdict of being, at fault because he did not participate in his own defense, and he didn't provide depositions and various material that the court had demanded on. So it was he was found guilty essentially in absentia in both cases. In these trials, both the Texas one this past week and the ones coming up in Connecticut, are simply to determine his financial liability. And so, more to come. Which gives him more opportunity to say things that are perjury and have him wind up with the prison sentence. And that's what I'm really, really hoping for the most, that the judge puts him in jail for some period of time for contempt of court, and then that the perjury cases proceed, because this guy really needs to be in prison.
Bob, thank you very much. We will stay tuned and watch for the Alex Jones saga. By the way, the other thing about you want to say to Alex is, if you're going to have a court case like this, don't have it in August. Just come up with an excuse to move it to when there's actual other news going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not a good call.
Not a good call.
All right. We'll see you soon.
Steve. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.